Florida isn't just slowing down. It's in total collapse. Tampa plummeting 8.9%. Cape Coral projected to crash 10%. Condos melting 12%. And foreclosures exploding to levels not seen since 2008. January 2026 marks the official beginning of Phase 2 of Florida's housing market crash. Behind the sun-soaked beaches and swaying palm trees, Florida's real estate market is imploding in real time. Cities that were once America's hottest destinations now lead the nation in brutal price declines, record foreclosures, and rampant negative equity. Insurance premiums skyrocketing 60%, inventory quadrupling, HOA fees crushing condo owners, and investors fleeing en masse. The warning signs aren't just flashing. They're screaming. According to Wall Street Journal analysis, several Florida markets now show distress signals stronger than those recorded before the 2008 financial crisis. Equity is evaporating overnight for families who bought at the peak. Local workers are being priced out entirely. And the math simply doesn't work anymore. Is your dream home in the Sunshine State about to become your worst financial nightmare? Stick around, because in this breakdown, we're exposing the forces driving Florida's total market collapse and why 2026 could be the year everything changes. Hit subscribe to Housing Intel and ring that bell for data-driven real estate intelligence you won't find anywhere else. Foreclosures. Hit critical levels. Phase 2 has begun. The first and most alarming signal that Florida's market has entered a new phase of crisis? Foreclosure activity is exploding across the state. Florida now leads the nation in foreclosure filings, entering 2026 with distressed properties flooding the market at rates not seen in over 15 years. In Ocala, foreclosed homes are selling at auction for 39% below their peak values. Families who purchased in 2021 and 2022, convinced they were making safe investments, are now watching their equity vanish completely. In Tampa, Orlando, Miami, and Jacksonville, negative equity has become what industry insiders are calling rampant. Homeowners owe more on their mortgages than their properties are worth, and they're trapped. This isn't just a statistical blip. It's a pattern eerily similar to 2008. Buyers who stretched to afford homes during the pandemic boom, often waiving inspections and paying tens of thousands over asking price, are now facing a brutal reality. Property values have dropped, but their mortgage balances haven't. When combined with soaring insurance costs and property taxes, many simply can't afford to stay. And they can't sell without bringing cash to closing. CoreLogic data projects that foreclosure activity will peak in the second and third quarters of 2026. That's right now. We're not talking about a distant threat. This is happening as we speak. Banks are processing defaults at accelerating rates, and distressed sales are about to flood an already oversupplied market. Each foreclosure drags down comparable sales in the neighborhood, creating a downward spiral that feeds on itself. For families caught in this trap, the emotional and financial toll is devastating. Dreams of building wealth through home ownership are crumbling. Retirement plans are being destroyed, and the Florida dream is turning into a financial nightmare for tens of thousands of households. Tampa, ground zero of the collapse. If there's one market that embodies Florida's 2026 crisis, it's Tampa. Once considered one of the hottest real estate markets in America, Tampa has become ground zero for the state's housing collapse. Home prices in Tampa have already fallen 4.7% over the past year. But the pain is just beginning. Industry forecasts project an additional decline of 3.6% to 8.9% throughout 2026. That means total declines could reach 13 to 14% from peak to trough. For a homeowner who purchased a $400,000 property in 2022, that's a loss of $52,000 to $56,000 in equity. Gone. Evaporated. Inventory has exploded in Tampa, surging 14.8% year over year and hitting 5.4 months of supply. To put that in perspective, a balanced market typically sits at around 6 months. But Tampa was running at under 2 months during the peak. This rapid surge in available homes signals one thing: sellers are desperate and buyers have leverage. The median home price now sits around $378,000, but median household incomes in Tampa haven't kept pace. The affordability gap is widening, not shrinking. Homes that once sold in 7 to 10 days during the frenzy of 2021 now sit on the market for 60 days or more. Price cuts have become the norm, not the exception. The neighborhoods hit hardest, those built or purchased between 2020 and 2023. Entire subdivisions of cookie-cutter homes, once selling before construction was complete, now feature rows of for-sale signs. Builders who overextended themselves are slashing prices to move inventory, and every price cut pulls down the value of neighboring homes. Tampa has officially flipped from a white-hot seller's market to a stone-cold buyer's market. And for those who bought at the top, there's no way out without significant financial pain. Cape Coral. The Venice of America is sinking. Cape Coral, often celebrated as the Venice of America for its sprawling canal system and waterfront lifestyle, is now sinking under the weight of one of Florida's most catastrophic market corrections. Projections for 2026 show Cape Coral home prices plummeting 10.2%. That's not a gentle correction. That's a full-on crash. Median home prices have already slipped from $381,000 to $378,000, and the decline is accelerating. But the price drop tells only part of the story. Active listings in Cape Coral have more than doubled, exploding from 1,800 properties to over 4,000. That surge in supply, combined with evaporating demand, has created a perfect storm. Homes are sitting on the market for 70 to 90 days, and desperate sellers are slashing asking prices by tens of thousands of dollars. The root cause? Reckless overbuilding. Between 2021 and 2023, Cape Coral was flooded with speculative construction. Developers, convinced the boom would never end, built thousands of new homes. They bet on endless migration from high-tax states and insatiable investor demand. That bet has failed spectacularly. Now, Cape Coral is drowning in inventory. New construction sits empty. Resale homes can't find buyers. And the local economy, heavily dependent on construction and real estate, is beginning to buckle. Then there's the insurance crisis. Properties in Cape Coral's flood zones are facing annual insurance premiums of $8,000 to $12,000. Some homeowners can't even find carriers willing to insure them, forcing them into Florida's state-run Citizens Property Insurance Pool at exorbitant rates. For many, the insurance cost alone is equivalent to a second mortgage payment. And it gets worse. Cape Coral has notorious utility expansion fees. New buyers in certain neighborhoods face assessments of $30,000 or more just to connect to city water and sewer systems. These hidden costs are deal-breakers for buyers who are already stretched thin by high mortgage rates and inflated home prices. The median home price in Cape Coral sits around $480,000, but the median household income is just $65,000. That's a ratio of 7.4 to 1. The math simply doesn't work. Local families are completely priced out. The market became entirely dependent on out-of-state buyers and investors, and both groups have vanished. Cape Coral still looks like paradise in the postcards, But for anyone considering buying there in 2026, it's a financial trap waiting to snap shut. If you're finding this breakdown eye-opening, hit that subscribe button to Housing Intel for weekly market intelligence that could save you from a catastrophic financial mistake. Northport and St. Petersburg, other epicenters of pain. Tampa and Cape Coral aren't alone. Northport and St. Petersburg are experiencing their own versions of the Florida housing implosion. Northport, another Gulf Coast market that saw explosive growth during the pandemic, is now projected to lose 8.9% in home values throughout 2026. Like Cape Coral, Northport suffers from overbuilding, strained infrastructure, and an affordability crisis. The rapid construction that defined 2021 and 2022 has left the market oversupplied and vulnerable. St. Petersburg tells an even more dramatic story. Some segments of the St. Pete market have already crashed 27% from their peak. Neighborhoods that were seeing bidding wars just 3 years ago are now littered with price reductions and stale listings. Waterfront condos that once commanded premium prices are sitting unsold for months. The pattern is consistent across Florida's Gulf Coast. Rapid appreciation during the boom, followed by brutal corrections as reality sets in. Climate risk, insurance costs, and affordability challenges are converging to create a perfect storm of downward pressure on prices. And this isn't limited to just a few cities. The collapse is spreading across the entire Sunbelt region of Florida, from coastal retreats to inland suburbs. No area is immune. The total collapse of condos. If single-family homes in Florida are struggling, condos are in absolute freefall. Condo prices across the state have plummeted 10.8% to 12%, a performance dramatically worse than detached homes. The catalyst? The tragic Surfside condo collapse in June of 2021. That disaster exposed decades of deferred maintenance and structural neglect. In response, Florida enacted sweeping new regulations requiring condo associations to conduct structural inspections and maintain adequate reserve funds for repairs. Sounds reasonable, right? Except the financial impact on condo owners has been catastrophic. HOA fees have surged 60% over the past 5 years in many buildings. Luxury coastal condos now charge $1,000 to $1,500 per month in HOA fees alone. For retirees on fixed incomes, these increases are unsustainable. But the real shock comes in the form of special assessments. Condo associations, scrambling to comply with new regulations and fund long-overdue repairs, are hitting owners with assessments ranging from $50,000 to $100,000 per unit. Imagine owning a condo you thought was paid off, only to receive a letter demanding $75,000 within 12 months for structural repairs and reserve funding. Many owners simply can't afford it. They're being forced to sell, often at steep losses, just to escape the financial burden. But finding buyers is nearly impossible. Who wants to purchase a condo with the risk of massive future assessments hanging overhead? The condo market in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and other coastal cities has completely frozen. Listings pile up, prices crater, and owners who plan to retire in their beachfront units are watching their nest eggs evaporate. The condo collapse isn't a temporary blip. It's a structural crisis driven by decades of neglect, new regulatory reality, and an insurance environment that makes coastal living financially untenable for average Americans. The investor exodus. Evacuation in progress. For years, real estate investors drove Florida's housing market. Cash buyers from around the country scooped up properties, betting on endless appreciation and strong rental income. But in 2026, investors are running for the exits. Investor purchases have collapsed 50 to 70% from their peak in Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, and Miami. The Airbnb and short-term rental market, once a gold mine, is now saturated. Vacancy rates in Cape Coral have climbed above 10%. Rental rates are falling 5.6% year over year, while property taxes and insurance costs are soaring. The result? Negative cash flow. Properties that were supposed to generate passive income are now bleeding money every month. Investors who leveraged themselves to build portfolios are being forced to liquidate before losses deepen further. Even institutional investors, the deep-pocketed firms like Blackstone that bought thousands of single-family homes during the last cycle, are reducing their exposure to Florida. The combination of climate risk, insurance volatility, and regulatory uncertainty has made the Sunshine State a less attractive investment. When the smart money leaves, it's a signal. And in Florida, the exodus is well underway. The insurance crisis, the silent killer. Perhaps no single factor is crushing Florida's housing market more than the insurance crisis. Homeowners' insurance premiums have skyrocketed 60% since 2022 across the entire state. In Cape Coral and other flood-prone areas, annual premiums range from $8,000 to $12,000. That's more than many families pay in property taxes. For some coastal properties, insurance costs rival the mortgage payment itself. Major insurance carriers have fled the state. State Farm, Farmers, and others have either pulled out entirely or severely limited their exposure to Florida. Homeowners are being forced into Citizens Property Insurance, the state-run insurer of last resort, where premiums are even higher and coverage is less comprehensive. Some properties, particularly those in high-risk flood zones or coastal areas vulnerable to hurricanes, are being denied coverage altogether. If you can't insure a home, you can't get a mortgage, and if you own it outright, you're gambling your entire net worth on a single storm season. The insurance crisis adds $500 to $1,000 to monthly housing costs. When combined with 7% mortgage rates, soaring HOA fees, and rising property taxes, the total monthly payment becomes unbearable. Middle-class families are being squeezed out completely. And this isn't a temporary problem. Climate change is making hurricanes more intense and sea level rise more pronounced. Insurance actuaries are pricing in permanent elevated risk. The days of cheap coastal living in Florida are over. Want to avoid markets that could cost you everything? Subscribe to Housing Intel for real-time analysis that cuts through the noise. Overbuilding. The supply shock. Florida didn't just experience high demand during the pandemic. It experienced a construction frenzy. Builders added tens of thousands of new homes between 2020 and 2023, particularly in markets like Cape Coral, North Port, and Lehigh Acres. Developers, convinced the boom would last forever, built speculatively. Entire neighborhoods rose from empty lots in record time. The problem? Demand has evaporated, but the supply remains. Cape Coral alone saw active listings double from 1,800 to 4,000 properties. New construction inventory is suffocating the resale market, and builders, desperate to move unsold homes, are offering incentives that were unthinkable just 2 years ago. $60,000 price cuts, paid closing costs, mortgage rate buydowns to 5%. Free upgrades worth $30,000 or more. These aren't signs of a healthy market. They're signs of panic. Every builder concession drags down comparable sales values across the neighborhood. Resale homeowners trying to sell find themselves competing with brand-new homes being offered at deep discounts. It's a race to the bottom, and there's no finish line in sight. Some builders are on the brink of bankruptcy. Smaller developers who overextended during the boom are being crushed by carrying costs on unsold inventory. When builders fail, it adds another layer of distress to an already fragile market. The affordability gap. The math doesn't work. At the heart of Florida's housing crisis is a simple, brutal reality. The math doesn't work anymore. In Cape Coral, the median home price sits at $480,000, but the median household income is just $65,000. That's a price-to-income ratio of 7.4 to 1. Historically, a ratio above 4 is considered unaffordable. In Tampa, the affordability index has hit its worst level in decades. With mortgage rates above 7%, a typical home purchase requires a monthly payment of $3,500 to $4,000 when you factor in mortgage, insurance, property taxes, and HOA fees. To afford that payment comfortably, a household needs to earn between $120,000 and $140,000 annually. But the median household income in Florida is just $67,000. Local families, teachers, nurses, first responders are completely priced out of home ownership. The market became entirely dependent on wealthy out-of-state buyers and investors, and both of those groups have largely disappeared. Out-of-state demand, which fueled Florida's pandemic boom, has cooled dramatically in 2025 and 2026. Remote workers who fled high-tax states are returning home as companies mandate office returns. Retirees are reconsidering Florida as insurance costs, and climate risks become undeniable. Without local affordability and without sustained out-of-state demand, the market has no foundation, and markets without foundations collapse. Migration reversing. Florida, man is leaving. For decades, Florida's growth story was built on one pillar: population growth. People moved to Florida for sun, beaches, no state income tax, and affordable living. But that narrative is crumbling. Population growth has slowed dramatically in 2025. Net migration is still positive, but far below the boom years. And some counties are reporting net outflows for the first time in decades. Why? Cost of living. Housing costs, insurance premiums, and rising property taxes have made Florida expensive. The promise of affordability has been shattered. Remote workers who fled to Florida during the pandemic are returning to their home states as offices reopen, and the reality of hurricane seasons, heat, and insurance bills sets in. Companies that announced relocations to Florida are reconsidering as insurance costs for commercial properties skyrocket. The business environment, while still favorable in some ways, is being undermined by infrastructure challenges and climate risks. When population growth stalls, housing demand collapses. And when demand collapses, prices follow. Florida is learning this lesson the hard way in 2026. Climate reality, check. The elephant in the room. There's one topic that real estate agents, developers, and sellers avoid at all costs: climate change. But it's the elephant in the room that can no longer be ignored. Hurricane Ian in 2022 devastated southwest Florida. 4 years later, reconstruction is still ongoing in some areas. The memory is fresh, and the risk is real. Sea level rise projections are no longer abstract scientific forecasts. They're being incorporated into flood zone remapping, insurance underwriting, and property valuations. Coastal areas once considered safe are being reclassified as high risk. Insurance actuaries are pricing climate risk permanently into premiums. This isn't a temporary spike. It's the new normal. And younger buyers, who will live with the consequences of climate change for decades, are increasingly avoiding high-risk coastal markets. The long-term viability of some coastal communities is being openly questioned. Will waterfront neighborhoods even be habitable in 30 or 40 years? Will insurance remain available at any price? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. Climate reality is reshaping where Americans choose to live and invest, and Florida is on the front lines of that reckoning. The buyer-seller standoff. Market paralysis. Nationally, there are 37.2% more sellers than buyers in the housing market. But in Florida, the gap is even wider. Sellers, many of whom purchased at the peak in 2021 and 2022, are reluctant to accept losses. They're anchored to prices that no longer exist, hoping the market will recover. But it's not recovering. It's deteriorating. Buyers, meanwhile, are waiting for bigger declines before they jump in. Why buy now when prices are falling every quarter? Why catch a falling knife when you can wait 6 months and save $50,000? The result is paralysis. Transaction volume has plummeted 30 to 40% year over year. Homes sit unsold. Sellers hold out. Buyers wait. And the market freezes. But this standoff can't last forever. Eventually, forced sellers, foreclosures, job losses, or financial stress will break the stalemate. When that happens, price discovery will be brutal. Distressed sales will set new comparable values, and the market will reset at dramatically lower levels. Florida is waiting for that catalyst. And in 2026, it's coming. Drop a comment below. Which Florida market shocked you the most? We read every single one. The evidence is undeniable. Florida's housing market collapse in 2026 isn't sensationalism or clickbait. It's documented reality backed by data from Zillow, Wall Street Journal, CoreLogic, and Florida Realtors. From Tampa to Cape Coral, from luxury condos to suburban single-family homes, from coastal retreats to inland developments, no segment is immune. Prices are plummeting. Foreclosures are exploding. Insurance is crushing affordability. Investors are fleeing. And the math simply doesn't work anymore. Families who thought they were making safe investments are watching equity evaporate overnight. Retirees who plan to live out their golden years in beachfront condos are facing financial ruin from special assessments. Local workers are being priced out entirely. And the Florida dream is turning into a nightmare for tens of thousands of households. But here's the critical takeaway. Knowledge is power. Armed with this market intelligence, you can make informed, strategic decisions. You can avoid the traps that are destroying wealth for others. You can wait out the chaos, identify real opportunities when they emerge, and position yourself wisely for whatever comes next. So if this breakdown opened your eyes to the reality of Florida's market, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to Housing Intel for weekly data-driven real estate analysis that cuts through the hype and delivers the truth. Ring that bell so you never miss critical market updates. And tell us in the comments, are you buying, selling, or sitting on the sidelines in 2026? Well, see you in the next video, where we reveal the markets that are actually worth your money in this chaotic environment. Because sometimes, knowing where not to buy is the most valuable investment decision of all.